Alright everyone, so this video is to explain your first essay, which is covering the early settlers and the Enlightenment movement. You guys have been exposed to a number of different accounts of these early experiences from different authors, different genres, different marginalized voices, mainstream voices. So it's important that we basically take these ideas and contextualize them within the larger framework of why these texts matter in American history and in the literary landscape. So for this essay, you're going to do a very simple thing. You're going to choose one of the authors that you've read in this unit, and then you're going to develop an analysis of a particular work from that author. If it's something like poetry or letters and you want to do more than one, that's fine. I would not do, say, a broad scope. I would do at most maybe 2 texts. So if you want to do both letters from Columbus, that's fine. If you want to do multiple poems, that's fine. But you'll be looking at the text and really examining how they portray or illustrate certain concepts from early American settlement and ideas. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to develop a literary analysis of the text. So much like I have been doing in the lectures where I'm breaking down the text, looking at the rhetoric that's used, symbolism, imagery, rhyme scheme, whatever it might be, and then taking that a step further and looking at how that illustrates or portrays a certain concept or idea from these early stages of American life and American identity. So you can't, say, examine a Columbus text without looking at who Columbus was and why he matters in the broad scope of American literature and American history. So you're basically going to be contextualizing the work and the author in relation to the political, social, economic changes, philosophical changes that were taking place during this time, as we were getting what we now know as a quote-unquote American identity. So for example, if you're going to choose Ben Franklin, and you're going to choose Poor Richard's Almanac, you need to look at who the audience was. Why was he addressing this particular audience? How did he do that with the structure of his text? So what about his texts targeted that audience? What about the language targeted that audience? What about the idioms, the examples, the analogies that he gave? And why was he trying to motivate them to believe a certain idea given the historical context of what was happening during the Revolutionary War? Same things if you look at, say, John and Abigail Adams. I want you to look at specifically how texts from authors like them might have portrayed particular political ideas, or even look at how they portrayed mainstream versus marginalized voices. So marginalized voices can be anything from female voices, African American voices, Native voices, Hispanic voices. Any of these are voices which weren't necessarily part of the mainstream power source. So looking at something like Phyllis Wheatley, you would want to examine her poetry, examine it for its poetical aspects, but then look further and explain how her position as a female and as an African American might have a particular emphasis or particular set of ideas that she's trying to put forward for the audience. So if you choose to do an Enlightenment person in particular, I would definitely say tie those ideas to the Enlightenment. So if you're going to choose to look at Thomas Jefferson, you're going to want to examine the Declaration of Independence for the language that it uses and the structure, but then also look at how it portrays certain Enlightenment principles, such as anything from Locke, anything that talks about the individual rights of man, so on and so forth. So basically, you're doing very similar to what I do in the lectures, where you break down the text and look at the text closely for its literary elements, but then carry it one step further and explain how the author's identity or the genre or what was going on at the historical time period plays into why that text was created. So all of these texts were created for reasons. There's a particular reason that Columbus was writing these letters. There's a particular reason that Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration based on these Lockean principles. There's a particular reason that Sergeant Murray was arguing for the equal rights of women based on their mental merit. So make sure that you are focusing on portraying those ideas by looking at the literature and then carrying it a step further and really looking at how the authors or the historical period influenced the text. Um, so what you're doing is you're supposed to be thinking in terms of why the text matters. So why does it matter that we have a Portia's Almanac? Why does it matter that we have poetry from Anne Bradstreet, the first female author in the New World? Why does it matter that we have poetry from someone like Phillis Wheatley? So think about what the text does. Think about the structure, the subject matter, the tone. What did they show about the author or society at that time period? Think about what the text says about how religion, society, family, identity all intersect during this time period. Think about how it influences our modern perception of history or national identity. Whichever text and focus you choose, you want to keep the argument very, very narrow, and you want to include 2 research sources in your work. I've given you guys a ton of links throughout the biographies that link off to credible sources. You can use any of these. You can use any of your own finding. Just make sure that you, A, cite them correctly in text and in a bibliography, and B, make sure that they are credible sources and that have solid foundational backing. So things like CBS or PBS or CBS or history.com or biography.com, any of these would work. You should also have a clear thesis and main ideas, and you should expand on these ideas with solid evidence from outside sources and from the text. The most important part is that you go back and you cite from the text. So use specific quotes from these authors to illustrate the idea. So if you're going to argue, for example, that Christopher Columbus had a very selfish agenda or was very self-focused, give me a quote that shows me that. If you're going to argue that Cabeza de Vaca was really illustrating the life and struggle of the Native American people, give me a quote that shows that. So you really want to use specific words, phrases, or passages to support your ideas with this in-depth analysis. So your essay is going to be 3 to 4 pages in length, and it's due by Sunday, April 8th at midnight. This means 2 things. One, that you have to turn it in by this deadline because you have all week to work on it. There cannot be a late excuse, so make sure you do it ahead of time. And then make sure that you have the minimum page number. So when I say 3 to 4 pages, you can always write a little bit more, but you can't write under. So if I say 3 pages minimum, that means it's 3 pages all the way down to the bottom of that 3rd page. Anything less than that, and I'll have to take off points. Remember also that you are going to have to use Mla formatting. So that's double-spaced, Times New Roman, Arial, or Cambria font. You have to have a title. You have to have a header in the top left corner that has your name, course with section number, my name as the instructor, and the date. And then every top right corner should have the page numbers. And then you have to have a bibliography as well. And then also remember that everything that you do will be checked through SafeAssign for plagiarism. So as I already said, don't plagiarize. It's not worth it. It will be found. So you guys are going to be assessed on criteria of making sure you have a close analysis of the work and its major concepts, as well as the author's identity and historical contextualization. Good, solid, concrete evidence to support your claims from both the text and from the research sources. Make sure you have the proper number, that's 2. Make sure you can always do more, just make sure you have at least 2. Make sure you have proper page length, MLA, and citations, and then a fully developed essay structure with the intro, main ideas, and conclusion, and then a good organization of all your ideas. So when you're looking at breaking down the text, there are some things that you can look at. Any of these might be helpful. You certainly shouldn't do them all because it's too much to cover, but look at the characters, look at how they're developed. So how does Columbus, say, promote himself as the protagonist? Look at literary devices, obviously, like similes, metaphors, personification, foreshadowing. Look at the structure. Is it a prose? Is it a poetry? How does the dramatic arc work in there? What's the conflict? What's the point of view or the narration? Look at literary concept like the theme, the symbol, the allusions, the style. And then look at historical context last. So look at the author, the work, what the events surrounding the work are. And then look at any issues, moral, ethical, social, that might be discussed in the text. So Hopefully you guys have a good idea of where you want to go in this. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, go ahead and move on to working on this.